It was 1783, and the old village of Al-Mirath lay silent. The air was heavy with an unspoken fear, as if the earth itself was holding its breath under the feet of the villagers. As the sun dipped into the horizon, Nabeel Siddiqui, a young scholar from the city, reached the gates of the village. His lantern flickered dimly against the encroaching darkness, throwing long shadows across the cobblestone path. "Welcome, traveler," croaked an old man whose voice was as brittle as autumn leaves. "You've come at a cursed hour." Nabeel frowned. "Cursed? What do you mean?" The old man could not respond when a crimson fog rolled in from the east and swallowed the entire village. It was unnatural, almost alive, and had about it the faint smell of iron, blood. Nabeel's lantern spat out its final fit of flame and went dark. A whisper emerged from the fog. It was soft, yet menacing. "You should not have come." The fog clung to the village like a suffocating blanket, its crimson hue casting an eerie glow over the narrow streets. Nabeel stumbled through the mist, his heart pounding in his chest. The village was eerily silent, save for the occasional creak of a wooden shutter or the distant howl of the wind. He found refuge in a small inn, where the innkeeper, a gaunt man named Bilal, eyed him with suspicion. "You're brave or foolish to travel in such times," Bilal muttered, pouring a cup of steaming tea. "What's happening here?" Nabeel asked, his voice trembling. Bilal's eyes darkened. "The fog. It comes every year, on the same night, and those who wander into it, they never return." Before Nabeel could respond, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. He rushed to the window and saw nothing as the fog blinded everything. Bilal grabbed his arm, his grip like iron. "Don't go out there. Not unless you want to meet the same fate." The scream echoed in Nabeel's mind as he sat by the fireplace, warmth failing to penetrate the growing unease inside him. Bilal retreated into the kitchen, leaving Nabeel to his thoughts. The walls of the inn closed in around him as the flickering fire cast grotesque shadows on the wooden beams. Then, the shadows started moving. Nabeel froze, his breath catching in his throat. The shadows twisted and writhed, taking on shapes that seemed to be human figures. They whispered in a language he couldn't make out, their voices growing louder and more urgent. "Who's here?" Nabeel called out, his voice trembling. The shadows converging into one towering figure. Its eyes glowed like embers, and its voice was a guttural growl. "Leave this place, or join the lost." Nabeel stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. The figure dissolved into the shadows just as Bilal returned, his face pale. "You saw them, didn't you?" Nabeel nodded, his throat dry. "What are they?" Bilal's voice was barely a whisper. "The souls of the taken." As the dawn broke, the crimson fog hung around, casting a sickly pall over Al-Mirath. Nabeel could not get rid of the feeling that he was being watched. He stepped outside to find the truth behind the village curse. The streets were deserted, but the tension was palpable, as if the walls had secrets. He approached a group of villagers who were gathered near the well, their faces drawn and anxious. Among them stood Amir, a tall man with a fierce gaze. "You shouldn't be here, scholar," Amir warned, his voice low. "The fog brings with it the spirits of the damned." "What do you mean?" Nabeel pressed, his curiosity piqued. Amir glanced around, checking if anyone was listening. "Each year, the fog takes one soul. It's a bargain from ages ago, and we can do nothing to stop it." Just then, the wind grew really chilly, and the fog deepened, swirling ominously. A figure emerged from the mist, shrouded in shadows. It was Layla, the village healer, who was renowned for her wisdom. "The time has come," she said, her voice shaking. "We have to prepare for the sacrifice." Nabeel's heart really started racing. "Sacrifice? Who?" he asked curiously. Layla's eyes met his, full of horror. "It could be any one of us. Even you," she said. The villagers looked one another in the face, all of them with a mix of fear and resignation etched there. Nabeel felt his stomach knot as he listened to the murmurs of the crowd. A stout man in his middle age, Tariq, stepped forward, his booming voice. "We cannot let fear dictate our fate. We must conquer the fog." "Confront it?" Aisha, a young woman with wide, terrified eyes, interrupted. "You know what it does. It takes our loved ones." Nabeel's determination surged within him. "If we face it together, we might find a way to break the curse." The villagers looked at each other with uncertainty on their faces. Then suddenly, a crack was heard in the square, and the fog began to swirl wildly. From within its depths, an icy laughter sounded, which ran down Nabeel's spine. "Foolish mortals!" a voice thundered from the fog. "You cannot escape your fate!" The ground heaved beneath their feet, the fog taking on monstrous form, threatening to tower above the villagers' tiny homes. "One of you will join the lost," beats Nabeel's racing heart as he saw that it wasn't just that this fog is an omen. It is, in fact, alive and feeding upon the fear inside their hearts. As the fog contorted and coiled, it called to him in an unspoken manner, scaring and fascinating him at the same time. "We stand as one," he cried, rallying the villagers, but it was too late because the fear that gripped them would soon disperse as they retreated into their houses. "Wait," he implored, but could hardly be heard as the howls of laughter drowned his cries from the caustic and derisive voices of the fog. Amir took a step forward, his face set. "We can't let it kill anyone else. We have to find out where its power comes from." Layla nodded, determination welling up in her eyes. "There's an ancient text in the library of Al-Mirath. It talks about the fog and the pact made centuries ago." "Then we must go there," Nabeel urged, a sense of urgency rising in him. "We need to understand what we're dealing with." As they walked into the library, fog trailed along behind them, encroaching an inch at each step. Dark silhouettes flitted across their visions and murmured to each other secrets of forgotten eras. "You will never escape," the silhouettes whispered in that chilling tune. At the sight of the stack of dusty old books inside the library, Nabeel's heart fell. "Where do we even begin?" he asked, his voice rising into desperation. She pointed to a large, leather-bound book. "This one. It holds the key to our salvation or our doom." Nabeel opened the ancient book, the pages yellowed with age. The words seemed to shimmer in the dim light, revealing a tale of betrayal and sacrifice. "The fog was summoned by a powerful sorcerer," he read aloud, "who sought to control the spirits of the dead. In exchange for power, he bound the souls of the villagers to the fog, forcing them to offer a sacrifice each year." Amir clenched his fists. "We have to break this curse." "But how?" Layla ran her fingers over the text, furrowing her brow. "It says here that the fog can be dispelled by confronting the sorcerer's spirit. We need to find his resting place and perform a ritual to release the souls." Nabeel felt a chill run down his spine. "And where is this resting place?" "Deep within the forest of Al-Mirath," Layla whispered back. "But it is said to be guarded by the very spirits the sorcerer enslaved." As they prepared to leave the library, the fog thickened outside, pressing against the windows like a living entity. "We don't have much time," Amir urged. "The fog will claim someone soon." Nabeel nodded, determination building up inside him. "We'll face whatever lies ahead together. We cannot let fear dictate our actions." With the ancient book clutched tightly in his hand, they stepped into swirling fog that sent the air getting colder by moment. The whispers grew louder, echoing their fears and doubts. "You will not survive," they taunted. But Nabeel was determined, driven by the hope of breaking the curse that had haunted Al-Mirath for generations. The forest loomed ahead, dark and ominous, its twisted trees doing perfectly the grimaces of the damned. As Nabeel, Amir, and Layla ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, the fog clung to them like a serpent wrapped around their legs. The atmosphere was laced with tension so much that any rustle of leaves would give them goosebumps. "Stay close," Amir warned, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "We can't afford to get separated." Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees, causing them to freeze in place. From the shadows emerged a figure, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was a spirit, its form shifting and flickering like a flame. "Turn back," it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper. "You do not belong here." Nabeel stepped forward, his heart racing. "We seek to break the curse of the fog. We mean no harm." The spirit laughed, a sound that sent chills down their spines. "You think you can defy the sorcerer's will? Many have tried and all have failed." She lifted the ancient tome high, her voice steady. "We know how to face him. We shall not be afraid." The spirit faltered, its shape wavering as it spoke. "Then you must prove yourself worthy. Go to the trials of the forest, or forever be lost to the fog." The spirit raised a bony finger and nodded toward a twisting path that led yet deeper into the forest. "Only those of worth may step forward. Slay your doubts, and possibly you will find Sorcerer's place of rest." Nabeel made eye contact with Amir and Layla, his purpose growing stronger still. "Whatever awaits us will be faced," declared Nabeel, stepping forth onto the track. As they walked, the forest came alive, shadows shifting and whispering secrets. The air became heavy with oppressive energy, and Nabeel felt a sense of foreboding wash over him. The ground beneath them trembled, and a chasm opened up, revealing a dark abyss. "Choose wisely," a voice boomed from the depths. "One of you must sacrifice something dear to cross." Nabeel's heart was racing. "What do we do?" Amir stepped forward, determination etched on his face. "I'll go first. I'll sacrifice my fear." As he spoke, a shimmering light enveloped him, and the chasm began to close. "Go, I'll find my way back." Nabeel and Layla watched in horror as Amir vanished into the light, leaving them alone. "We can't leave him," Layla cried, but Nabeel grabbed her arm. "We have to keep going. We'll find him." With heavy hearts, Nabeel and Layla continued on, the forest growing darker and more twisted. The whispers of the spirits surrounded them, echoing their fears and regrets. "You will never escape," they taunted, their voices a haunting melody. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a clearing where the remnants of an ancient altar lay in ruins. "This must be where the sorcerer performed his dark rituals," Nabeel murmured, examining the cracked stones. Layla knelt beside the altar, tracing the faded inscriptions with her fingers. "We have to do it here in order to face his spirit." As they readied the altar, the fog started to move ominously around them, and the air became thick with tension. Nabeel could feel that the spirits were pressing in, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. "You cannot succeed," they hissed with a sinister chorus, voices intertwining. "Concentrate, Layla," urged Nabeel, trying to drown out the cacophony. "We need to summon the sorcerer's spirit." Layla nodded, her face set. "We have to recite the incantation from the book. It's our only hope." As she started to chant, the ground shook beneath them, and the fog solidified into a dark figure with eyes that glowed with evil. The sorcerer had come, his presence suffocating. "Foolish mortals," he sneered, his voice echoing through the clearing. "You dare challenge me?" Nabeel stepped forward, his heart pounding. "We seek to free the souls you've bound to the fog. Your reign of terror ends here." The sorcerer laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Nabeel's spine. "You think you can defeat me? I am eternal." With a wave of his hand, the fog surged forward, threatening to engulf them. Nabeel and Layla braced themselves, their resolve unyielding. "We will not be afraid," Nabeel shouted, and together they continued the incantation, their voices rising above the chaos. The sorcerer's laughter echoed through the clearing, mingling with the howling wind. As Nabeel and Layla recited the incantation, the fog began to writhe and twist, as if in pain. "You cannot break my hold!" the sorcerer roared, his form flickering like a candle in the wind. But Nabeel felt a surge of power within him, fueled by the memories of the villagers who had suffered under the sorcerer's curse. "We are not alone!" he shouted, channeling their collective strength. "The spirits of Al-Mirath stand with us!" The fog recoiled, and the sorcerer's expression shifted from arrogance to fury. "You think you can summon the dead against me? They are mine!" Layla's voice came out steady and unwavering. "No more! We will save them!" As they went on with the incantation, the earth shook violently under them, and the fog dissipated to reveal anguished faces of the lost souls trapped within. They reached out, their eyes desperate. "Help us!" they cried in unison, a haunting chorus. He could feel the wave of empathy wash over him. "We will not abandon you," he vowed, heart racing. "Together, we can break this curse." The form of the sorcerer flickered as his power waned because the spirits rallied around Nabeel and Layla. "No, this cannot be," he screamed, filled with rage. With a final burst of energy, Nabeel and Layla yelled out the last words of the incantation. The fog burst in a blinding flash of light as the form of the sorcerer dissipated into nothingness, his screams silenced into silence. The light faded, and the clearing became silent. The fog lifted, revealing the sun breaking through the trees, casting a warm glow over the forest. Nabeel and Layla stood breathless, their hearts pounding in the aftermath of the confrontation. The spirits of the lost souls began to manifest about them, their faces moving from the expression of desperation to thanksgiving. "You have freed us," one whispered in a soft, otherworldly voice. "Thank you." Nabeel felt tears sting at his eyes as he looked upon the faces so long aggrieved. "You are free now. Go to the light," he urged, choking on the words. The spirits nodded as they began their ascent, casting behind a feeling of peace that lingered in the air. "We will remember you," another said, its voice fading as it vanished into the sky. Layla turned to Nabeel, her eyes shining with tears. "We did it. We broke the curse." But as they stepped out of the clearing, a cold wind howled through the forest, and a voice they knew well rang in the air. "You may have defeated me, but my legacy will live on." Nabeel and Layla exchanged worried glances, the weight of the sorcerer's words hanging heavy in the air. "We have to get back to the village," Nabeel said, his voice urgent. "We have to warn them." As they made their way back to Al-Mirath, the forest felt different, lighter, yet still tinged with an unsettling energy. The sun shone brightly, but Nabeel couldn't shake the feeling that the sorcerer's presence lingered. When they reached the village, they found it bustling with activity. The villagers were gathered in the square, their faces filled with relief and joy. "You're back," Amir exclaimed, rushing towards them. "We feared the worst." Nabeel took a deep breath. His heart was racing. "We faced the sorcerer and released the lost souls. The fog is gone." The villagers erupted in cheers, but Nabeel's expression was serious. "But we have to be careful. The legacy of the sorcerer may still haunt us." Layla nodded, her brow furrowed. "We have to ensure that the knowledge of the sorcerer's dark magic is preserved, so it can never be used again." Tariq stepped forward, determination in his eyes. "We will build a new library, a place to safeguard our history and protect our future." As the villagers started discussing plans for the library, Nabeel felt a wave of hope over him. They had faced darkness and emerged stronger, united in their resolve to protect their home. But as night started to fall, a familiar chill crept into the air, and Nabeel couldn't shake the feeling that the sorcerer's spirit was still watching, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Days turned to weeks, and the village of Al-Mirath began healing. The library was built. It was packed with stories from the past, lessons learned by their encounter with a sorcerer. Nabeel had been working day in and day out to catalog the old texts, and yet he just couldn't stop feeling this heavy unease that seemed to settle over him like a shroud. One evening, when the sun set, casting long shadows across the village, Nabeel saw a figure at the edge of the forest. It was shrouded in darkness. Its features could not be distinguished. A shiver ran down his spine as he watched it move, almost gliding through the trees. "Layla!" he called out, his voice urgent. She hurried over, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she followed his gaze. "What is it?" "That figure. It's been watching us," Nabeel replied, his heart racing. Layla squinted into the gathering darkness. "We should tell the others. It could be a remnant of the sorcerer's magic." As they turned towards their village, a gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a whisper that sent shivers down their spines. "You cannot run from your fate." Nabeel's heart sank. "We have to prepare ourselves. We can't afford to let the spirit of that sorcerer out. We have to be prepared in case it rises again in front of us." They assembled the villagers and spoke of their concerns. Amir had become a leader among them. He listened carefully. "We have to harden our defenses. The sorcerer may have been defeated, but his power can still remain." The villagers nodded in unison, with faces set on determination. They began fortifying the village by creating barriers and collecting supplies. But Nabeel could not feel time was passing out. As night began to fall, the village seemed bustling with activity, yet some shadowy feeling hung heavily in the air. Nabeel stood on the edge of the village, looking out into the dark forest. His heart pounded with every beat. He could feel that the figure had not come back, yet its presence seemed to hover just beyond the trees. "Are we ready?" Layla asked, joining him. Her voice was steady, but he could see the worry in her eyes. Nabeel nodded, though doubt clawed at him. "We have done all we can. All we can do is be watchful." Then, a blood-curdling scream rent the night, echoing through the village. The blood ran cold in Nabeel's veins as he turned to see a villager, Samira, stumble into the square, her face almost yellowish with fear and wide-eyed with horror. "It's back. The fog. It's coming." Panic broke out among the villagers as they prepared for what was to come. Nabeel felt a rush of adrenaline as he rallied with Amir, Layla, and the others. "We must face it as one. We cannot let it consume us with fear." As the fog rolled in, thick and suffocating, Nabeel could see the figure emerging from its depths, his eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "You thought you could defeat me?" The sorcerer's voice echoed, chilling to the bone. "I will reclaim what is mine." They stood firm with their hearts thumping in the fog that churned around them as the sorcerer's laugh echoed through the air. Determination coursed through Nabeel's veins. "We've faced darkness before, and we will do so again." Layla took one step forward as she clutched the ancient book tightly. "We have knowledge to defeat him once and for all. We have to perform the ritual again." Amir nodded, his face fierce. "We stand united. We cannot let him take anyone else." As they continued chanting the incantation, the fog grew heavier, and the figure of the sorcerer loomed larger, eyes burning with anger. "You think you can bind me again? I am eternal." Nabeel felt the weight of the hopes of the villagers rest on his shoulders. "We are stronger together," he shouted, his voice raised above the din. The fog charged forward, but the villagers did not back down. Instead, their voices blended into a perfect chant, their united will struggling to break the form of the sorcerer and crackle through with energy. "Feel the strength of the lost souls," Layla cried out. "You will not take them again." They raised one last frenzied effort, shouted the last words of the incantation, and the fog burst in a blinding flash of light. The sorcerer screamed his lungs out. Then he simply ceased to be there. Only silence was left behind. As the light faded, the fog lifted, revealing a clear night sky filled with stars. The villagers stood in stunned silence, their hearts racing as they processed what had just happened. Nabeel felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew the battle was not truly over. "We did it," Layla whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "We finally defeated him." But Nabeel's eyes were locked on the horizon where the forest ended and the sky began. "We must ensure this shadow does not recur. The wizard may have left, but his shadow could still cling." Amir took a step forward, a determination above his lips. "We mustn't forget our past knowledge. The library will be our haven, a place to remember from our days." The villagers nodded, all of their spirits lifted up, but aware that this is a very thin piece, which one wrong move and it may get broken easily. They start to gather around Nabeel and Layla, talking stories of their forefathers, the struggles in protecting this homeland. As sunrise burst upon Al-Mirath with a golden light, Nabeel found hope growing within his heart. "We will rebuild, and we will remember. Together we can see that such darkness will never be again." But, as they were to enjoy their conquered victory, a wind blew over the village, carrying with it a whisper that sent shivers down the spines of Nabeel. "You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over." Days turned into weeks, and life in Al-Mirath slowly returned to normal. The villagers worked together to strengthen their defenses and preserve their history, but Nabeel couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. One evening, pouncing over ancient texts in the library, he was struck by something that made him skin crawl. The sorcerer's spirit can be overcome. However, power may assume new forms. See the shadows there. Nabeel's heart was racing as he shared his discovery with Layla. "We have to warn the villagers. The influence of the sorcerer may not be gone after all." Layla's expression turned grave. "We must remain vigilant. If his power can take root in the shadows, we need to confront it before it grows." That evening, when the villagers had come for a meeting, Nabeel felt a strange feeling in the air. "We have conquered the sorcerer, but must be wary. His inheritance may still bother us." Amir nodded in agreement, with a serious look on his face. "We need to start a watch. We can't let our guard down." As they planned, a chill ran down the room, and the lights dimmed ominously. The villagers looked at one another with an air of fear. The coming days were restless as the villagers kept watch, but the shadows seemed to grow bolder. Nabeel often caught dark figures lurking at the edges of the village, which unnerved him. One night, while patrolling the perimeter with Amir, they heard a soft whispering that made their spines tingle. "Join us, join us." "What was that?" Amir whispered. Nabeel strained to listen, his heart racing. "It's coming from the forest." They creeped closer to the line of trees. Darkness gobbled them whole. Further in, they heard their voices, more insistent on being heard with whispers. "You cannot outrun your destiny." The darkness had taken form in the figure whose eyes glowed red. "You thought you would be able to win me? You're not the only one." Nabeel's heart sank as he realized the truth. The sorcerer's spirit had found a way to manifest through the fears of the villagers, feeding off their doubts. "We must stand together," he shouted, rallying Amir and the others who had followed them. But the shadows surged forward, threatening to engulf them. "You will join us," they hissed, their voices a chilling chorus. As the shadows creep in, determination surged through him. "We will not fear," he was shouting above all the chaos of the moment, his voice bursting out. "We have had darkness before us, and again we will face it." The villagers rallied up to him now, their spirits united in purpose. "Together, Layla screamed, her voice steady. "We will face this darkness." They began to chant the incantation from the ancient book, their voices rising in unison. The shadows writhed and twisted, struggling against the power of their combined will. "You cannot bind us," the figure roared, its form flickering. But Nabeel felt the strength of the villagers behind him, their hopes and dreams fueling his resolve. "We are stronger together," he shouted, channeling their collective energy. With one last blast, they spoke the final words of the incantation, and shadows burst into blinding light. The figure screamed, form breaking apart to wisps of darkness that seemed to dissipate in the night air. The whispers were gone. The forest had a profound silence envelop it. As the light faded, Nabeel and the villagers stood together, panting and shivering. The weight of fear that had hung over them for so long began to dissipate as a sense of hope and unity emerged. "We did it," Layla whispered, tears of relief streaming down her face. "We finally defeated the darkness." Nabeel gazed at his friends' and neighbors' faces, their countenance a blend of exhaustion and triumph. "This victory is yours and mine," he declared firmly. "Together we conquered our fears and we came out more strengthened." As dawn broke, casting a warm glow over Al-Mirath, the villagers embraced one another, celebrating their hard-won freedom. They had faced the shadows and emerged victorious, but Nabeel knew that their journey was far from over. "We must remain vigilant," he reminded them. "The darkness may return in different forms, but as long as we stand together, we can face anything." The villagers nodded, their spirits lifted with the promise of a brighter future. They started rebuilding, not only their houses but also their sense of community, and sharing stories of courage and resilience. As Nabeel gazed over the village, he felt peace wash over him. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but it was in their unity and the unyielding spirit that made Al-Mirath strong. "Let us honor those we lost," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "And let us make sure that their sacrifices were not in vain." And so, with that, the villagers move around the newly built library, deemed to be a symbol of their resilience in persevering over how to remember their own history. With candles lit in their memory, flames flitted to give the meaning that there is always light amidst the dark. As the sun continued to rise high into the sky, Nabeel felt renewed in his determination. They would keep defending their homeland, learn from history, and stand as one against all adversities. "Together we are invincible," he declared, and the villagers cheered and echoed through the valley, reminding them that hope and courage would never lose. Thank you for following along with The Crimson Fog. If you enjoyed the story, please like, comment, and subscribe for more thrilling tales.